Daniel, we found the only woman in Asheville more desperate than you. Bryce Caldwell's voice rolled through the ballroom like a polished insult, smooth enough to earn laughter before anyone admitted it was cruel. Crystal glasses paused halfway to painted lips. Silverware clicked against porcelain. Beneath the warm glow of 3 chandeliers, nearly 200 guests turned toward the stage, eager to see who had been chosen for the evening's little surprise. Daniel Mercer stood beside the microphone in his only dark suit, one hand resting near the worn leather wallet in his pocket. He had been told this was a charity gala. He had been told someone wanted to introduce him to a woman. No one had told him that another human being was about to be offered to the room as entertainment. Come on, Daniel, a man called from the nearest table. Try to look grateful. At least give her a chance. It is only a joke. Daniel did not answer. Across the room, his 10-year-old daughter, Lucy, sat beside the owner of the garage where he worked, her small hands folded around a paper cup of sparkling cider. She was not laughing. She knew that look in her father's eyes. It was the same quiet stillness that came over him when a customer blamed him for damage he had not caused, when a bill arrived that he could not yet pay, or when someone mentioned the wife he had buried 6 years earlier. Daniel had learned that dignity did not always speak first. Sometimes it waited until cruelty had finished introducing itself. Bryce lifted one hand toward the tall double doors at the back of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Nora Whitaker. The doors opened. A woman stepped into the light wearing a midnight blue dress and a pale silk scarf draped over one shoulder. She was tall, composed, and beautiful in the way old trees were beautiful after surviving lightning. Then the spotlight shifted. The room saw the scars along the left side of her face and neck. A few guests looked away. Others leaned closer. Somewhere near the stage, a woman covered a laugh with her napkin, and that single sound gave permission for several more to follow. Nora stopped walking. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her scarf. She had entered boardrooms filled with hostile investors. She had faced reporters who asked whether she still recognized herself in the mirror. Yet nothing prepared a person for the moment a crowded room decided her pain was funny. Bryce smiled as though he had arranged something charming. Daniel, you may refuse. No one here would blame you. Turn around, someone whispered. Save yourself. She cannot expect him to stay. Daniel looked at Nora. He did not stare at her scars. He noticed the way she held her breath. He noticed the small tremor in her hand. He noticed that she had already begun lowering her eyes, preparing to protect what remained of her pride. Then Bryce placed the microphone in front of him. Well, Daniel, is she your date? Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he said. The laughter returned, louder this time. Nora closed her eyes. Lucy rose from her chair. Bryce grinned. Then Daniel stepped away from the stage and walked toward Nora. No, he repeated, his voice low enough to make the room strain to hear him. He reached into his wallet and removed a blackened silver pendant shaped like a swallow. The moment Nora saw it, the color left her face. Daniel held it beneath the chandelier, where the burned metal caught a thin line of gold. She is not my date, he said. She is the reason my daughter is alive. The laughter vanished. Every glass became still. Every phone lowered. And in the silence that followed, Nora Whitaker looked at the little girl running toward her and heard a voice she had carried in her memory for 6 years. I remember you, Lucy whispered. 3 days earlier, none of them knew they were about to meet. 3 days earlier, Daniel Mercer was standing beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of Blue Ridge Auto Works, tightening the final bolt on a dented Ford pickup that had already swallowed most of his morning. The garage smelled of motor oil, hot rubber, and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. An air wrench rattled across the room. Rain tapped against the metal roof. Daniel wiped his hands on a faded red shop towel and studied the repair estimate clipped to the windshield. You undercharged him again, called Marcus Hale, the garage owner. The man has 2 kids and just lost his job, Daniel replied. His transmission does not care. Neither does his landlord. Marcus shook his head, but there was no anger in it. Daniel had always been that way. He could stretch $15 across 3 days, wear the same work boots until the soul surrendered, and still find a reason to make someone else's burden lighter. Kindness had cost him plenty. He had simply never considered that a reason to stop. The side door opened, letting in a gust of cold mountain air. Lucy Mercer stepped inside wearing a yellow raincoat, her dark blonde hair escaping from a loose braid. She carried a brown paper bag in one hand and a folded cream envelope in the other. Lunch delivery, she announced. Peanut butter? Daniel asked. Turkey. I am trying to keep you alive. Very responsible. Someone has to be. Marcus laughed from behind the parts counter. Lucy placed the bag on Daniel's toolbox, then held up the envelope. This came from Mr. Caldwell's foundation. Daniel's expression changed. He took the invitation carefully, leaving faint grease marks along its gold border. The card invited him and Lucy to a charity gala at the Whitaker Grand Hotel on Saturday evening. Marcus leaned over his shoulder. That is the biggest fundraiser in Asheville. You should go. I do not own a tuxedo. You own a suit. I wore it to a funeral. The humor left the room as quietly as it had entered. Lucy looked down at Daniel's worn leather wallet resting beside the register. Its corner had split years ago, but he refused to replace it. She picked it up before he could stop her. You still carry it, she said. The wallet opened in her hands, revealing a blackened silver pendant shaped like a swallow. Its left wing was warped by heat. A thin chain remained curled behind it like a burned thread. Daniel gently took the wallet back. Careful, sweetheart. Why do you keep it hidden? Because it belongs to someone else. 6 years earlier, firefighters had placed that pendant in Daniel's palm outside the Hawthorne Hotel while smoke rolled above the rooftops. His wife had not come out. Lucy had. She had been 5 years old, wrapped in a gray emergency blanket, clutching the little silver bird so tightly that its edges had marked her skin. She remembered a woman's voice through the smoke. Keep talking. Keep breathing. Your father is waiting. Daniel had searched hospital lists, newspaper reports, and fire department records, but the woman who carried Lucy to safety had disappeared before he could thank her. Do you think we will ever find her? Lucy asked. Daniel closed the wallet and returned it to his pocket. I think some debts are too important to forget. Then maybe you should come to the gala, Marcus said, tapping the invitation. Whitaker money rebuilt half the city after that fire. Someone there might know something. Daniel looked at Lucy. She was trying not to hope too visibly. All right, he said. We will go. Lucy smiled and wrapped both arms around him, ignoring the grease on his shirt. Outside, the rain softened against the roof. Inside Daniel's pocket, the burned swallow rested beside his heart, waiting for the woman whose name he did not yet know. Across town, while Daniel Mercer agreed to attend the gala, Nora Whitaker stood before a hotel mirror and tried to decide whether courage required the scarf. The presidential suite of the Whitaker Grand overlooked downtown Asheville, where rain turned the streets silver and the Blue Ridge Mountains disappeared behind a curtain of gray. On the bed lay a midnight blue dress, a pair of simple black shoes, and the pale silk scarf her assistant had placed beside them without being asked. Nora touched the left side of her face. The scars began near her temple, crossed her cheek, and continued beneath the collar of her blouse. She did not fear mirrors. Mirrors only reflected light. People added judgment. The board meeting begins at 4, said Evelyn Brooks from the doorway. Evelyn had worked beside Nora for 12 years and had learned when to speak softly. Bryce wants the press photographs taken first. Of course he does. You can decline. If I decline, he will say I am hiding. And if you attend, he will make certain everyone stares. Nora lowered her hand. Then let them stare. She had returned to Asheville to lead the 6th anniversary fundraiser for families displaced by the Hawthorne Hotel fire. The Whitaker Foundation had rebuilt homes, funded counseling, and paid medical bills, but Nora had not attended the previous 5 ceremonies. The newspapers called her reclusive. The board called her fragile. Neither word was true. She had simply grown tired of entering rooms where sympathy arrived before respect. Downstairs, the ballroom staff moved beneath chandeliers, arranging white roses and gold place cards across 30 round tables. Nora entered through the service corridor to avoid the photographers. Her heels made almost no sound on the carpet, but the room still noticed her. Conversations shortened. Eyes shifted. A young server carrying champagne glasses turned too quickly and saw Nora without the scarf. The tray slipped. Glass struck the marble floor in a bright, ringing crash. I am so sorry, the server whispered. I did not mean to stare. 3 supervisors rushed forward. Clean this up. Get another tray. Miss Whitaker, we apologize. Nora knelt before anyone could stop her and began gathering the unbroken glasses. What is your name? She asked. Emily. Are you hurt, Emily? No, ma'am. Then nothing important was broken. The girl's hands trembled as she reached for a fallen napkin. I thought you would be angry. Nora placed the last glass upright. People have dropped worse things in front of me. The supervisors exchanged uncertain looks. Nora rose and handed Emily the folded napkin. Under the chandelier, the scars along her cheek were fully visible. She made no effort to cover them. When someone looks different, Nora said gently, you do not owe them panic, and they do not owe you comfort. You simply keep treating them like a person. Emily nodded, her eyes shining with embarrassment and relief. Thank you. Nora turned toward the ballroom doors. She had survived the fire, the surgeries, and years of strangers deciding what her face meant before she spoke. Yet the greatest exhaustion came from proving that survival had not made her bitter. In the empty ballroom, a microphone clicked on near the stage. Bryce Caldwell appeared beside it, smiling as though every room belonged to him. There she is, he said, our brave guest of honor. Nora studied him. His words were warm. His eyes were not. On a table behind him, a small camera blinked red, then went dark. Bryce, Nora said, what are you planning? His smile widened. Only something unforgettable. A successful fundraiser. Bryce replied, spreading his hands beneath the empty chandeliers. Nothing more. Nora watched him for another moment. Bryce Caldwell had spent 15 years mastering the appearance of sincerity. He remembered birthdays, donated publicly, and spoke about compassion whenever a camera was near. But kindness performed for an audience was not kindness. It was advertising. The foundation vote happens after the gala, Nora said. If you have something to say it in the boardroom. Bryce adjusted his silver cuff link. You always assume the worst of me. Experience saves time. She walked past him without looking back. Only when the ballroom doors closed did his smile disappear. From behind the stage curtain, Tessa Monroe stepped into view with a tablet pressed against her chest. Her red heels clicked across the marble, sharp and impatient. She saw the camera. She saw a camera, Bryce corrected. She did not see the other 6. Tessa glanced toward the doors. You told me this was supposed to embarrass her, not destroy the foundation. The foundation will survive. Will you? Bryce's eyes hardened. In less than 72 hours, Nora planned to present evidence that money from the Hawthorne Recovery Fund had been redirected through consulting contracts Bryce controlled. The documents were incomplete, but they were close enough to end his position, his reputation, and the comfortable life built around both. He did not need to prove Nora dishonest. He only needed to make her look unstable before she spoke. Who did you choose? He asked. Tessa opened the tablet. A photograph of Daniel Mercer appeared on the screen, taken outside Blue Ridge Auto Works. Grease marked his work shirt. Lucy stood beside him holding a lunch bag. 39. Widowed. Auto body technician. Lives in a rented duplex on the west side. No criminal record, no public profile, no money worth mentioning. Perfect. There is more. His wife died in the Hawthorne fire. Bryce looked up. Does Nora know him? There is no record they ever met. Tessa swiped to another photograph. He received an invitation through Marcus Hale, one of our small business donors. Hale thinks we are honoring local single parents. Bryce leaned closer to the screen. A grieving mechanic placed beside a scarred heiress. The room will write the story for us. And if he is polite, then we push. If he refuses to participate, everyone participates when 200 people are watching. Tessa shifted uneasily. What exactly do you want him to do? Bryce looked toward the stage, imagining Nora beneath the spotlight, exposed before donors, reporters, and board members. I want him surprised. I want her humiliated. I want the audience to believe she arranged the introduction because she is lonely enough to buy affection. That is cruel. Cruelty is such an emotional word. What word would you use? Useful. The ballroom ventilation hummed above them. On stage, a microphone waited beside a white rose arrangement. Near the nearest table, one hidden camera blinked red. Then another. Then another. Tessa opened a draft livestream page and turned the tablet toward him. Across the top, bold letters read, Scarred heiress rejected by poor mechanic. Bryce smiled. Schedule it for 8:45. Nora enters at 8:47. Exactly. Tessa hesitated before pressing save. What if Daniel recognizes what we are doing? Bryce glanced once more at the photograph of the quiet man in the faded work shirt. Men like him are grateful just to be invited into rooms like this. But 3 miles away, Daniel Mercer was teaching his daughter how to polish an old pair of shoes. unaware that strangers had mistaken his lack of wealth for a lack of dignity. By Saturday evening, the rain had cleared, leaving downtown Asheville washed in cold blue light as Daniel and Lucy entered the Whitaker Grand through a side entrance marked for local honorees. Daniel wore the dark suit he had last worn 6 years earlier, and Lucy had tied a narrow yellow ribbon around his wrist because she said he looked too serious without it. "Do not pull at your collar," she warned. "I am not pulling. You are thinking about pulling. That is not the same thing." Their voices echoed softly through the service hallway, where rolling carts rattled behind closed kitchen doors and the smell of coffee mixed with fresh roses. Daniel checked the invitation again. A volunteer had directed them toward the ballroom, but the corridor divided twice, and neither sign mentioned the gala. Then a sharp electronic tone sounded overhead. 1 note. 2 notes. 3. The fire alarm lights began flashing. Lucy froze. Daniel reached for her hand, but before he could speak, he heard someone struggling to breathe around the corner. A woman stood against the wall beneath a red exit sign, one hand pressed to her chest and the other gripping a pale silk scarf. Her midnight blue dress caught the pulsing light. The scars along the left side of her face appeared, vanished, then appeared again. Daniel did not stare. He recognized fear before he recognized anything else. "It is a scheduled system test," he said calmly. The notice was taped near the entrance. The woman tried to answer, but her breath came too quickly. "I know," she managed. Knowing does not always help. Daniel stopped several feet away, leaving enough space for her to choose whether he came closer. "May I stay here?" She nodded. The alarm continued. Metal carts rolled somewhere behind the walls. Nora closed her eyes, but the sound only seemed to grow louder. "Look at me," Daniel said. "Not the light. Just me." Her eyes opened. "Tell me 3 things you can see." "The exit sign." "Good. Your daughter's yellow ribbon." Lucy glanced at her father's wrist. Nora swallowed. "And a crack in the tile." "2 things you can hear." "The alarm." "1 more." She listened. Beneath the electronic tone came the soft hum of the ventilation system. "The air conditioning." Daniel nodded. Now 1 reason to stay in this moment. Nora looked past him at Lucy, who stood quietly with both hands around a small silver purse. "A little girl is waiting for her." "Father." Daniel's expression softened. "Then we both have a reason." The alarm stopped. Silence settled through the hallway, so suddenly that Nora could hear her own breathing slow. Lucy stepped forward and offered her a folded tissue. "You can keep it," she said. "It has tiny stars on it." Nora accepted it with careful fingers. "Thank you. My name is Lucy." "That is a beautiful name." Daniel gave a small nod. "Daniel." Nora hesitated. "Nora." No last names. No titles. No history. Just 3 people beneath an exit sign, standing inside the kind of silence that asked nothing from them. Lucy studied Nora's face with the open honesty of a child. "Your eyes look familiar," she said. Daniel gently touched her shoulder. "Lucy, I do not mean anything bad," she continued. "They look like the eyes of someone who saved somebody." Nora's breath caught again, but this time it was not fear. Daniel noticed and changed the subject before the moment became too heavy. "We are trying to find the ballroom." "You are close," Nora said. "Take the next hallway, then turn right." She looked at Lucy once more. "I hope you enjoy the evening." "Will you be there?" Lucy asked. Nora lifted the scarf toward her shoulder, then let it fall back into her hand. "I believe I will." Daniel thanked her, and he and Lucy continued down the corridor. Nora remained beneath the exit sign, watching them disappear around the corner. For the first time in years, a stranger had seen her panic, seen her scars, and asked for nothing. She did not know that the burned silver swallow in Daniel's wallet had once rested against her own heart. Daniel did not know that the woman he had just helped breathe was the woman he had spent 6 years trying to find. And neither of them knew that, beyond the ballroom doors, 7 hidden cameras were already waiting. At 8:47, Bryce Caldwell stepped beneath the chandeliers and lifted the microphone with the confidence of a man who believed the room belonged to him. "Before we begin the final auction," he said, "we have arranged something special for one of Asheville's most hard-working single fathers." Applause moved politely across the ballroom. Daniel sat beside Lucy near the back, already uneasy. A spotlight found him before he could stand. "Daniel Mercer." Bryce continued. "Come join us." "Do I have to?" Lucy whispered. "Apparently, I do." Then remember what you always tell me. What is that? Do not let rude people choose who you become. Daniel squeezed her hand and walked toward the stage. Cameras rose. Glasses paused. Somewhere behind a white rose arrangement, a red light began to blink. Bryce placed one hand on Daniel's shoulder. We heard you have been alone for 6 years. Daniel removed the hand without making a scene. I have a daughter. I am not alone. A few people laughed softly. Bryce smiled wider. Of course. But every good man deserves companionship, and we found the only woman in Asheville who may understand what it means to be overlooked. The double doors opened. Nora stood beneath the ballroom lights, the pale scarf resting loosely around her shoulders. Daniel recognized her immediately as the woman from the service hallway. She recognized Lucy first. Relief touched her expression, but it vanished when Bryce reached toward the scarf and pretended to adjust it for the cameras. The silk slipped from Nora's shoulder. Her scars were fully exposed. A hush came first, then a whisper, then laughter from one table near the stage. Turn around, Daniel. No one would blame you. It is only a joke. Nora stopped walking. Her hand rose toward her face, then lowered. She had spent years learning not to hide, yet humiliation could still make even the strongest person search for somewhere smaller to stand. Bryce held out the microphone. Well, Daniel, is she your date? Daniel looked at Nora, not at the scars, at the fear she was trying to carry with dignity. No, he said. Laughter broke louder across the room. Nora closed her eyes. Lucy stood so quickly that her chair scraped against the floor. Daniel stepped away from Bryce. No, he repeated, quieter this time. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his old leather wallet. His fingers found the blackened silver swallow inside. When he held it beneath the chandelier, Nora's face changed. Her breath stopped. Her hand moved to the empty place below. Her collarbone. Where did you get that? She whispered. Daniel stared at her. 6 years of unanswered questions gathered in his chest. It was in my daughter's hand when firefighters brought her out of the Hawthorne Hotel. Nora took one step back. She would not stop crying, she said. I told her to hold it and keep talking. Daniel's eyes filled. You told her her father was waiting. Nora covered her mouth. Lucy ran toward the stage. I remember your voice, she said. Nora dropped to her knees as Lucy wrapped both arms around her. The room fell silent, but it was no longer the silence of judgment. It was the silence of people realizing they had laughed at the scars of a woman who had walked into smoke so a child could walk out. Daniel faced the crowd. His voice remained calm. You saw a face you thought was easy to mock. I saw the woman who returned my daughter to me. One glass touched a table. Someone began to cry. Then another. Bryce lowered the microphone, but Daniel was not finished. She is not a joke. She is not a lesson for your entertainment. She is the reason Lucy has birthdays, school mornings, and a future. Nora looked up at him through tears she had refused to shed for years. Around them, phones slowly lowered. Even those who had laughed could no longer meet her eyes. And beneath the chandeliers, with Lucy still holding her, Nora finally heard something stronger than pity. Respect. Respect lasted less than 10 seconds before the first camera rose again. A reporter near the front lifted her phone. Then a donor beside her did the same. Screens appeared across the ballroom like small cold windows, each one pointed at Nora, Lucy, and the tears still shining on Daniel's face. This is extraordinary, Bryce said, recovering his smile as he reached for the microphone. A beautiful reunion made possible by the Whitaker Foundation. Daniel turned slowly. Put the microphone down. Bryce blinked. Daniel, people need to hear this. They heard enough. This moment could help thousands. Then why are your cameras hidden behind flowers? The room shifted. Tessa Monroe stood near the sound booth, frozen with one hand over her tablet. Nora followed Daniel's gaze and saw the tiny red light beneath the white roses. Another blinked beside the stage curtain. A third reflected in the silver ice bucket near the donor tables. Her breathing changed. The ballroom disappeared behind the memory of bright lights, shouted questions, and reporters waiting outside hospital doors after the fire. How many? She whispered. Bryce stepped closer. Nora, do not misunderstand. We wanted to capture something meaningful. How many cameras? 7. Tessa said before she could stop herself. Nora looked at Bryce. You planned this. I planned an introduction. You planned my humiliation. Bryce raised both hands. No one forced anyone to laugh. No, Daniel said. You only gave them permission. Phones remained lifted. A man near the aisle whispered that the live stream had already reached thousands of viewers. Nora heard him. Her hand moved toward the scarf lying on the floor, but Lucy picked it up first. The little girl did not place it over Nora's scars. She folded it carefully and held it against her chest. You do not have to hide, Lucy said. Nora tried to smile, but the room had become too bright. Daniel stepped between her and the nearest phones. Lower them. We are in a public event, someone replied. This is history. This is a person. His voice was not loud, yet it traveled farther than Bryce's microphone. One by one, several guests lowered their screens. Others did not. Daniel removed the small wireless microphone clipped near Nora's neckline and placed it on the table. You do not get to shame her, he told Bryce. Then take credit when the room cries. Bryce's face tightened. Think carefully. I invited you here. I can help your family. Daniel looked at Lucy, then at Nora. A man who needs your permission to keep his dignity has already lost it. He offered Nora his hand. She stared at it for a moment, not because she doubted him, but because no one had offered her a way out without demanding something in return. She took it. They left through the service corridor as voices rose behind them. Outside, rain had begun again, soft against the hotel awning and steady on the roofs of parked cars. Nora stopped. Beneath a streetlight, her shoulders trembling. I saved children that night, she said. I survived everything after it, but I never learned how to walk into a room without wondering who would look away. Daniel stood beside her, close enough to stay, far enough to let her breathe. You do not need to become easier for cruel people to look at. She turned toward him. I do not know how to fix what they took from me. Daniel glanced at Lucy, who was holding the folded scarf in one hand and the silver swallow in the other. Maybe you do not need to be fixed. The rain filled the silence between them. Behind the hotel windows, the gala continued without them. But for the first time that evening, Nora no longer felt like the person left outside. By sunrise, the video had traveled farther than anyone in the ballroom expected. It appeared on local news pages, neighborhood groups, and thousands of phones under a headline Bryce Caldwell had chosen before Nora ever entered the room. By 8 o'clock, a second story followed. It claimed Daniel Mercer had been hired to stage an emotional reunion, that Nora had used a grieving father to repair her public image, and that the entire scene had been planned for sympathy. At Blue Ridge Auto Works, Marcus Hale stood beside Daniel's toolbox with a printed email in his hand. The insurance partner called, he said. 2 fleet accounts are threatening to leave. Daniel looked through the open garage door, where gray morning light rested on the wet pavement. So what happens now? Marcus lowered his eyes. I have to suspend you until this settles. I understand. No, you do not. I know you did nothing wrong. Then do not apologize for protecting the people who work here. Daniel removed his name patch, placed it beside the red shop towel, and walked out carrying the same dented lunchbox he had brought in for years. Across town, Nora sat before a row of cameras in the Whitaker Grand Ballroom. This time, there was no scarf on her shoulder. No spotlight had been chosen for her. No one else held the microphone. Bryce watched from the edge of the room as Nora placed a small recorder on the table. Last night, she began, a man tried to turn my face, my history, and a child's gratitude into entertainment. Bryce stepped forward. Nora, this is not the proper forum. Sit down. The room obeyed before he did. Nora pressed play. Tessa's voice filled the ballroom first, asking what Bryce wanted Daniel to do. Then Bryce answered clearly. He wanted Daniel surprised. He wanted Nora humiliated. He wanted the audience to believe she was lonely enough to buy affection. Silence followed the recording. Nora opened a folder and placed copies of financial records before the board. The documents showed recovery money routed through false consulting contracts controlled by Bryce. You are twisting routine expenses, he said. No, Nora replied. I am naming them. You cannot destroy me over one mistake. This was not one mistake. It was a pattern. She looked toward the cameras. The most dangerous thing in that ballroom was not one cruel man. It was a room full of decent people who decided it was easier to laugh with him than stand against him. By noon, the board removed Bryce from his position and referred the financial records for investigation. Tessa released the full, unedited footage and admitted her part in the plan. That afternoon, Nora found Daniel sitting with Lucy on a bench outside the closed public library, sharing 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. Marcus told me what happened, she said. I can replace your salary. I can buy the garage. I can make certain you never worry about money again. Daniel studied the steam rising from his cup. That would turn gratitude into a debt. Then tell me what would not. He looked at Lucy, then at the silver swallow resting in Nora's palm. Use the money for families who survived fires and never learned how to live after them. Counseling, job training, childcare, a place where people are not treated like broken things. Nora's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. You would give away the chance to change your own life? Daniel shook his head. That would change my life. Lucy reached across the bench and took Nora's hand. For the first time, Nora understood that redemption was not about erasing what had happened. It was about deciding what the pain would build next. 1 year later, morning sunlight poured through the restored windows of a former textile warehouse on the west side of Asheville. Above the entrance, a simple blue sign read Second Light Family Recovery Center. Inside, children's drawings covered the brick walls. Coffee warmed in the community kitchen, and the steady rhythm of tools came from a workshop at the back. Daniel stood beside an open car hood, teaching 3 single parents how to replace a worn belt without paying a repair shop more than they could afford. His sleeves were rolled up. His hands were stained with grease. For the first time in years, the work felt larger than survival. Slow pressure, he told them. Do not force it. Are you talking about the engine or life? One father asked. Daniel smiled. Both. Across the hall, Nora sat with a group of children who had survived fires, accidents, and the long silence that sometimes followed fear. She no longer wore a scarf unless the weather required one. Some children asked about her scars. Others never mentioned them. Nora answered every honest question with grace, because she had learned that curiosity could be guided, but shame only grew when hidden. Lucy appeared in the doorway carrying a framed drawing almost as wide as her shoulders. It is finished, she announced. Daniel wiped his hands and followed her into the lobby, where volunteers, families, and local donors gathered beneath strings of warm lights. Lucy placed the portrait on an easel and pulled away the cloth. It showed Nora standing before the old Hawthorne Hotel, one hand holding a silver swallow and the other reaching toward a little girl. Every scar on Nora's face had been drawn carefully in soft shades of gold. Nora stared at it. You included all of them. Lucy nodded. Of course. Why? The room became quiet. Lucy looked at Nora with the same open honesty she had carried into the ballroom 1 year earlier. Because I did not want to erase the part that saved me. Nora closed her eyes as tears gathered, but this time she did not turn away. Daniel stood near the front door, watching the woman who had once believed love required hiding become the person. Children trusted enough to follow into the light. After the guests left, evening settled over Asheville. Rain tapped softly against the windows, just as it had the night they met. Lucy arranged 3 plates on a small table in the center kitchen. Daniel found Nora placing the silver swallow inside a glass display case beside a card that read, Courage does not always look unafraid. Dinner is ready, he said. Nora glanced toward Lucy, then back at him. Is this a staff dinner? No, a foundation meeting? No, Daniel took a breath. It is just dinner. With us. Nora smiled.